All right, you guys can see my screen, correct? Not the presentation screen. All right. So just a quick question before we get started. For the participants here, we're just curious to know what kind of computation training you have and what kind of computation you do on a day-to-day basis. Julian, if you have any specific questions, feel free to jump in.
Yeah. I guess I'll start because I suggested it. I'm Julian Pistorius. I used to work at Cybers on the Atmosphere Cloud platform for researchers, and before that, I've used a little bit of Amazon EC2 and just bare machine Linux hardware. I'd never used OpenStack before until I started working at Cybers. And I never actually used HPC before, really, until I started helping researchers with computation at the University of Arizona with ResBazAZ. So yeah, I guess, and Raspberry Pis, lots of Raspberry Pis.
I guess I'll hop on next. My name is Michael. I'm a new postdoc with Cybers and the Carpentries. Just started about a month and a half ago. I have done, a little bit of Amazon EC2. I used R. I'm in Davis, California. Just finished my PhD here. I did quite a bit of stuff on our computing cluster here. So like running stuff with Slurm scheduler. Yeah, very little to no actual computational training, sort of fly by the seat of your pants. So yeah, I'm excited to learn a little more, and especially knowing that there's going to be some Cybers Jetstream 2 integration stuff. I figured I'd dip my toes in a bit.
Hi, I'm Chinmay Joshi. I'm a PhD student at University of Arizona. I don't do much computation. I use quite a bit of R to analyze my data, behavior of data. And I have never used Cybers or Jetstream, but just curious to learn more.
Well, guess I'll go next. I'm Sanjana Sudarshan. I work at Indiana University. I didn't have a whole lot of computing experience, but I was in a computational biology lab, and my computing experience started there with writing awkward awk code. So to basically analyze data and stuff like that. And then I progressed into R and used a lot of R and learned some Python and a tiny bit of C, basically trying to troubleshoot is what I did with C, somebody else's program. And then I joined Indiana University and joined the Jetstream team. And my Unix skills obviously were helpful in my role as an admin for a lot of the Jetstream instances. But I also learned a lot of OpenStack. And apart from this tutorial, we also do the OpenStack API tutorial for Jetstream. And I guess that's it. Blake, do you want to go?
Sure, I'm Blake. I don't know anything still, and I didn't know anything before, and that hasn't changed. No, my background's ecology and genetics, and I got into cyber infrastructure through coding and then bioinformatics, and then eventually through Cybers as well, and that's how I know everybody here. And I'm something of a champion for Jetstream and will continue to be in my new position at UAB.
All right, so today I'm going to give a brief introduction on Jetstream, what it is, what it cannot do, and how it can be useful in your day-to-day research. So a brief background on Jetstream. So Jetstream is funded by the National Science Foundation, and traditionally the NSF has been funding supercomputers with petascale capability. So lots of cores, lots of memory, And some examples of that are Blue Waters, Stampede, and Comet. They've all been renewed for second cycles. So once they knew that supercomputers are useful and all that, they started funding research into building cloud. So networking, lots of computer science based stuff. Basically trying to figure out what goes into building a cloud. So some examples of that are Cloud Lab and Chameleon. They've also been renewed for second phase. And once that was successful, they then moved into building research cloud for production. Examples of that are Jetstream and Bridges. Bridges is a hybrid HPC cloud system. Jetstream is 100% cloud. Jetstream has been extended to Jetstream 2, and by the end of the year, we will hopefully make the transition to Jetstream 2. And if you have any questions at any point, feel free to ask me. I'm not paying attention to the chat, so please chime in. So what are we doing here? So we are trying to expand NSF's XD reach and impact. So XD is the Extreme Digital Program, and it is an umbrella program under which we have Exceed and various other programs. So our goal is to expand the reach and impact of this program. And some of the things we hear when we go to various campuses is that they don't have enough computing power. But we've also seen that people that have received NSF support, of those people, only 2% of them have completed computation or data analysis on an Exceed resource, which is also paid for by the NSF. So why only 2% of the people have used this resource, and only 4% of the people even have an Exceed portal account? And 70% of the people that had NSF grants still said that they were resource constrained. And some of the reasons for this is perceived ease of access. So a lot of people think that supercomputing, Jetstream is a supercomputer, and that they don't have the skill, the know-how to use these machines. And some people just say, well, it's a supercomputer. I just need something a little more powerful than my laptop, not quite a supercomputer. So this is something that we hear on a regular basis when we do tutorials and workshops, is I don't have the research needs. I don't need a supercomputer. But then again, we see things like this happen where people are running their scripts on their computer for hours and hours. And, for all of you R programmers, this is an R script that's been running for 10 hours. And you can move this kind of calculation or computation to a machine that's sitting and is ready to do this kind of calculation, and free up your laptop, your personal computer to, I don't know, do some shopping or watch Netflix. I don't know. So this is one of the reasons why we exist. So what is Jetstream and why does it exist?
We used to actually take like sticky notes and put them on the monitor of the computer, and then like duct tape the power cord into the wall so no one would trip over it and pull it out when we were doing. So I love the seatbelt thing. That's perfect. I need to get that.
Yeah, I have seen that in my master's lab, but they used to literally lock the lab and not allow people to go because, things happen.
So if you move all of that stuff to a machine that is running 24/7, you don't have to deal with that kind of issue. And I think somebody from the Cybers group actually posted this on one of the Slack channels, and I've been using this picture forever because this is, apparently when you tell people that you can use a supercomputer, it doesn't really get through to them as well as this picture does. So there it is. Anyways, what is Jetstream and why does it exist? Jetstream is the National Science Foundation's first production cloud facility, and our focus is ease of use and broad accessibility. So people that are not familiar with supercomputers, people that are not familiar with computing even, can come in, select an image from a user selectable library of pre-configured virtual machines, and you can start a running instance of that image and install your software and carry on. And for people that are really good at computing, who know what they're doing on the terminal, can configure these virtual machines to launch 10 at a time, to do whatever computation they need to do, and then spin it down. So you can configure your environment with bash scripts. And we also provide on-demand interactive computing, which basically means that working on a virtual machine is like working on your personal computer. You have access to it all the time. You can start running a script and you can interact with it like you would on your personal computer. If you've ever run a job on a HPC cluster, you know that it's submitted to a queue and it's sitting there and eventually starts running. You don't really know what's happening until the job's finished, and then you can analyze your data. That's not the case with Jetstream. And the other advantage is there's nobody in queue before you, because this is an isolated machine dedicated to one user. And most important in research is reproducibility. So if you have a virtual machine with data on it, with workflow all set up, you can save that as an image and share it within your community, share it within your lab, and make sure everybody has access to that, the same data, the same workflow you're looking at. And so that avoids the "this works on my machine" issue for the most part. Who uses Jetstream? Now, if you are a researcher that requires thousands of cores, Jetstream is not the right resource for you. We can definitely point you in the right direction, to the right resource. But if you need a dozen to a few dozen cores, then Jetstream is perfect. If you are a software creator and you need to create your workflow, you can get started on Jetstream because of the smaller footprint. And if you are a science gateway creator, you can use Jetstream for either a front end or as a processor for scientific jobs. So if you don't know what a science gateway is, think of a portal where, suppose you go to a web portal, you submit your query, and the computation is done in the background. And what usually happens is these, if you suppose you have to do a RNA sequence analysis and you want to submit your query to a server. And so when you submit it to that web portal, it analyzes the job profile, and if it fits a certain profile, it would send it to that supercomputer. So if it fits Jetstream's profile, it would send that job to Jetstream, and the calculation is done, and then the result is packaged and given back to the user. Now, the user usually doesn't know where these jobs are being processed, and the user doesn't care where these jobs are being processed as long as they get their results. So we have, that's actually been quite useful for science. Jetstream's been quite useful for science gateways. Or you can also host your website on Jetstream. The other use we've seen for Jetstream is STEM educators. Every semester we have a variety of subjects being taught on Jetstream, and more so with COVID and people not being able to go physically into classrooms. We've seen that in the beginning of the pandemic, definitely we had a lot of inquiries as to how they could teach a class on Jetstream. And it's also useful for workshops. So if you're conducting a workshop, you can create a machine. You can create a workflow on a machine for users to log into. You can demonstrate how to do networking, the various kinds of classes, like as you mentioned, Slim clusters. We have tutorials on how to build Slim clusters on Jetstream. So that's something you might be interested in. So some examples a couple examples of Jetstream being used. This is an example of a project that we had in 2019. We had 3 students, Eliza Foran, Evan Soggs, and Tinesius Underwood, work on this project, recognizing frog calls. And the main goal was to ease the burden of data collection on field scientists. And the automatic recognition of frog calls or animal calls in general is desirable on 2 fronts, because 1, it reduces the burden of initial data analysis, and 2, it supports non-intrusive environmental monitoring. So these guys outlined a proof of concept of data collection and data analysis that can be used by researchers, and they generated a workflow. They were able to bring in, feed their data into a database and virtual machines, and that were hosted on Exceed and Wrangler services. So they presented this work at the PERC conference in 2019. And an example of a gateway is brainlife.io, which is a science gateway for neuroscience analysis. So the lab that started this was initially based at IU, and they started with a few custom workflows on Jetstream. And when their project started to get bigger and they needed bigger machines, they expanded to Microsoft Azure, and they moved their work to that. But their data is still backed up through virtual Solarium clusters on both Indiana University and the Texas Advanced Computing Center clouds. And so this is a good example of starting small on Jetstream and expanding. And as far as I know, BrainLife used Jetstream actively for a few years before they moved to a bigger machine. All right, what Jetstream isn't. Jetstream is not a traditional HPC system. So like I mentioned before, you don't have to wait in queue, and you have more interactive ability on Jetstream. So you can start and stop a program and see what's happening when you run something. There is no shared file system. So think cloudy. Think of each virtual machine as a separate machine that is dedicated to you, the user. And so you need to bring in whatever software you want, and you have complete control over that virtual machine. And this isn't Amazon, Azure, or Google. It is very similar because it was based on AWS for the most part. So that users would have some familiarity when they move from one system to the other. But we're definitely not as big as them. We are a really small team based at Indiana University and at TAC. But we are dedicated to research and education, and we are 100% free. We don't charge users for launching using virtual machines. We don't charge users for bringing or moving their data in and out of the system. And that's because we've already been paid for by the National Science Foundation. The infrastructure is in place. Some of the staff is being paid for by the NSF's funding. So some of this I've already mentioned. There's no reservation queuing. You have more interactive usage. You also have root access. You are your own admin. So you don't have to wait for a system administrator to come in and install software. You can install mostly any software you want. And since our images are based on Linux, you can mostly install any Linux software you want. Now, again, you have root access. So with root access, you could basically just do a rm-r and delete everything. We don't back up data. We don't back up anything. So if a user loses their data, it's gone forever. So that's just a couple things to keep in mind. In Jetstream in the way of the cloud. So clouds are more than just virtual machines. The old way of thinking was to invest in expensive infrastructure and cheap software, and you expect your hardware to fail, not your software. But the cloudy way is to invest in commodity infrastructure and to put your intelligence into software so that it can handle any infrastructure failure. And our favorite is thinking about VMs as cows, not pets. Pets you take great care of and you feed them, you name them. Cows you intend to have high turnover. So when you think about virtual machines, you need to you shouldn't be attached to them. So if you install a software and it corrupts your environment, you change a path somewhere and nothing works anymore, the best thing to do will be to just delete your virtual machine and start over instead of trying to fix it. We see this always with students where they try and try and try and try for days to fix their virtual machine because they've spent half an hour installing something, and that's, you want to save your virtual machine. But the best thing to do would be to start over. And in most cases, you can get back to your working condition in about 2 hours instead of spending days. And students usually don't understand this, and they do eventually once they've spent 3 days trying to rescue a virtual machine. So Jetstream system overview. We have 3 clusters, 2 are production and 1 development cluster at the University of Arizona. The production systems are at Indiana University and Texas Advanced Computing Center in Austin, Texas. The IU and TAC clouds are identical in terms of the nodes and cores and storage and so on. And if a user comes in and launches a virtual machine, it would be at the IU or TAC cluster. Nobody but the development team has access to the development cluster. So this is the platform overview of Jetstream. And again, we have identical clouds. We have some software bits, we have accounting bits, we have authentication bits. And software basically is OpenStack, Ceph is a storage backend. We have Apple services on OpenStack. Accounting is done through Exceed, and authentication is done through Globus. And on top of that, we have the Atmosphere API. On top of all of this is the web app, which is what most people like to access. And today we will be focusing on the web app. So this is basically what the Atmosphere web interface looks like once you log in. You have the dashboard, projects, images, and so on. Down here, you have the allocation source. So when you apply for an allocation, you are awarded a certain number of service units. So this is what we see here is how much of that allocation has been used, is how many service units these allocations have used. And if you scroll down further, you will see what resources the user is using. So how many CPUs, how many volumes, what kind of memory, and so on. The Jetstream team maintains some images. Images can be contributed by users. So we have community-sponsored images, and then we have some featured images. The featured images are the ones that are maintained by Jetstream. So we make sure that the images are up to date and patched for any security holes. The community-sponsored images could be useful if you know who's generated those images, and if you know that it's secure. And a lot of times, if you don't know what images are available, you can just come in and search. So here you see all these tags. You can search by a tag name. Suppose you need a biology or a bio image, you can just come in here and type bio, and it's going to pull up everything with the name bio in the text. So, launching an instance is as easy as coming to selecting an image you want and saying, I want the latest image version. I want it to be a part of this project, and this is your allocation source. You can choose either Indiana University or TAC as your provider. And there are various instance sizes to choose from. So something to remember is when you, on the drop-down menu, you will see the size of the instance, and it will also tell you how many CPUs that instance will have. So if you use a tiny instance has 1 CPU, but an extra large has 44 CPUs. And what that means is, first of all, that's how many CPUs it has. Second, if your virtual machine has 1 CPU, then it will be consuming 1 service unit per hour. But if your CPU has 44, if your virtual machine has 44 CPUs, it will be consuming 44 service units per hour. And so you need to think about the kind of job you're running and try and figure out what size virtual machine you need. So if you are running a extra large to run a Python script that does 2 + 2 = 4, then you're wasting all of that computing power. And imagine you have 50,000 SUs and you're using 44 SUs per hour. We'll run out pretty quickly because that's 44 times 24 hours in a day. So that's how many SUs you'll be using per day. So it'll probably last you like a month or so. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're launching instances. So this is what it looks like once your instance has been launched, and we will go over all of the details that you see on this page in the hands-on part. And Jetstream gives you access to a web shell. And this is like working on your terminal, but you're using the internet to do that. And you also get a web desktop. So for people that are not comfortable or familiar with the terminal or command line interface, can use a web desktop. And this is basically just point and click. You can use the browser to go to websites, download stuff, install programs, and so on. So the other way to access Jetstream is through the Horizon GUI interface. And it allows for most things you can do from the CLI. And it is actually nice to see when you're building networks, when you're able to attach when you have a network, when you have a router attached to it, and then you have an instance attached to it, and then it's connected to the world. It's nice to see the visualizer to see that you're able to build all of this. But the huge downside to that is it is incredibly slow. And a lot of times, if you're just using the API side, you can just do a lot of things before a page loads in the Horizon GUI. And the other thing that we are using right now is Exosphere. Exosphere is developed by Julian and Chris. So if you have any specific questions about Exosphere, feel free to ask Julian. But I find Exosphere to be super useful, and it is very user-friendly. So you can just come in and select what image you need. And when you use Horizon, you need to build your network, you need to provide security groups and so on. And Exosphere basically just automates all of that. So for users who don't want to do that, they don't have to. They can just come in and it's really fast too. And Julian, I've entirely moved to using Exosphere. I don't use Atmosphere or Horizon anymore these days. So just have to say that. That's how much I love it. All right, so hardware and instance flavors. So I mentioned some of this earlier. The Tiny has one virtual CPU, extra large has 44, and we charge based only on virtual CPUs. It doesn't matter what kind of storage you're using, what kind of RAM you're using. If you use if all of our users only use Tinies, then if you remember from the infrastructure slide, we had 320 nodes at IU intact. Each node can fit 46 tiny virtual machines. But if all of our users just launch extra larges, then you can only fit one on each node. And that means we can have 320 users on IU Cloud and 320 users on the TAC Cloud. And so that is another reason why we ask users to make sure they know what size instance they need and to just be, considerate of the other users. So all instances have a tiny amount of storage. This is ephemeral. So if your instance is deleted and you don't need that instance anymore, you delete it, everything that you stored on that instance is gone. And if you have any important data, the better way to store it would be to attach it to a volume. And that is also allocated through Exceed, and that is a more permanent solution for data storage. So we are getting GPUs on Jetstream. They are being, it is available to some early users right now, but with Jetstream 2, we will have more GPUs. So right now, the only way to get access to GPUs is by asking us for access. So this is not being allocated through Exceed. All right, so using Jetstream VMs, there are two primary ways of logging into Jetstream. One is through the interactive user access, so the web interface. We're using VNC or SSH. And the other is to direct VNC or SSH. You can use either the Atmosphere interface, or you can use the API, OpenStack, or Horizon Access, and also Exosphere. So who uses Jetstream? All of these people in these different, from these different disciplines. We have people from the biological sciences, some major chunk of our users. Then we have the biophysicists, and we also do have a lot of people doing education and training, be it for their classes or workshops. And we have people doing computer science, earth sciences, humanities on Jetstream. And one of the things we've seen is that a lot of these people had never heard of Exceed. And so that's something that we're super, super proud of, is we were able to bring these people to this national infrastructure. Jetstream for engineering researchers. So if you use MATLAB, this is something we like to advertise because Jetstream has MATLAB installed. So if you are a Jetstream user, you have MATLAB and Simulink on both IU and TAC Cloud. It is free for the user because Jetstream has paid for the site-wide licensing of MATLAB on both clouds. And we did notice, we actually had a few requests for MATLAB. We, for a few years, had one MATLAB image, and because MATLAB just takes up a lot of space. The smallest instance you could launch with MATLAB was a medium, which uses 6 GPUs. And we found out over a few years was that not everybody needed all of the MATLAB tools and Simulink toolkits. And so there were a few requests to create a smaller MATLAB image. And so Jeremy, my colleague, he went through and made a MATLAB Slim version where only the essential toolkits are available, and that can be launched on a smaller machine. And we find that people use both the regular MATLAB, which uses six CPUs, and MATLAB Lite, which uses four CPUs. And so when people think about supercomputers, they think the only people that use these supercomputers are the molecular dynamics people, the people that do simulations and so on. But we do have a lot of people using doing financial analysis or humanities or satellite data analysis. We do have a computer science class where they teach you how to a networking class, sorry, where they were trying to hack a virtual machine inside a container, I think. And we see a lot of people doing text analysis and natural language processing. And one of the things that we noticed very early on was a lot of these users that were coming in were launching instances, installing R, and imaging them. And so after a few R images were built, we found out that they were all building R images for a class. And so what we went ahead and did was created a featured image where we installed R and just made it available as a featured image. And so users can now just come in and use that R image. And so over time, because we've had requests for this, we now have an R Studio, we have an R Shiny server also running on Jetstream. Jetstream for education, this is something that we're incredibly proud of. Is people haven't heard of Jetstream before, and now they're using it to teach classes. And it's used to, if you use a computer for your class, then you can use Jetstream to teach your class, to do your data analysis and so on. And so we have a number of classes being taught on Jetstream, and a lot of the data analysis classes and principles of cloud computing. It's just super incredibly useful when you want to learn about cloud and OpenStack and things like that, to use this infrastructure that's already in place. I'm going to skip that slide. Gateways. We have, when I started working for Jetstream, I remember there were 9 gateways that were up and running. Now we have about 50 gateways on Jetstream, and we keep getting more and more requests for gateways. And like I mentioned before, gateway, think of it as a web portal where you submit a query and the results are analyzed on a supercomputer. The Jetstream RU program, we've had RU programs since 2017. So every year we have students come in from various universities, various backgrounds, may or may not know how to compute, doesn't really matter. But what we do is every year there's a PERC tutorial and a PERC conference, and the conference has a theme, machine learning or so on. And so we try to create projects for students that they can come in, learn how to use the cloud, learn how to do some machine learning, and take that project to PERC and present their poster. So we've done that for 4 years. We are doing that again this year, I think. And it's been a rewarding experience for the students and for us interacting with them. All right, so usage highlights. We've seen, as of Jan 21, we've seen around 400 active Exceed projects from 56 fields of science, over 2,000 active users from over 400 universities using Jetstream. And 80% of our users had never used another Exceed system before. Since June 2016, we've allocated almost 400 million CPU hours. We have 49 active science gateways, and every semester we have a number of education allocations, and we've had around 1,200 students at one point, and those numbers ebb and flow every semester depending on the need. And we've received the higher user satisfaction in the most recent XSEED survey. What's coming next is Jetstream 2. Jetstream 2 is going to be on primarily on Indiana University campus. Going to have 416 nodes, and then we have regional clouds at TAC, Arizona State University, and University of Hawaii, and Cornell. So the basic platform overview is similar to Jetstream 1, but the main difference here is that we will be using some third-party clients as well, along with Atmosphere, and so we are still trying to figure out all the third-party clients that we could use or would use. We're definitely going to be using Exosphere because we've already seen that people like it. I love it, and it's just easy to use. And when we want people to use Jetstream, when we want to onboard more people, you want something that's easy to use and not something that would scare people away. All right, so we are in our 5th year of operations. We've been extended till November 21, and Jetstream 2 will hopefully go into production before that. That's October 2021. So trial allocations are available today. If people are interested in trial allocations, you can go get that. But the only problem with the trial allocation is that it has very limited SUs. So 2,000 SUs is what a user gets for a trial allocation, and you can only launch a tiny or a small instance. So if you want to try out a MATLAB instance, for example, probably won't be able to. Jetstream allocations for education can be requested anytime. But if Jetstream startup allocations can also be requested anytime. And a startup allocation is what people usually go for because it gives you 50,000 service units, and you get to understand how your research will use these service units. Do you need more than 50,000? You can basically create a scaling document from your use of the startup allocation. And if you want more than 50,000 SUs, you can always ask for a research allocation. That requires a little more work. You need to give us a project description and tell us why you need whatever SUs you're asking for. So if you ask for 1 million SUs, you need to tell us why, and if you've done any scaling. And we can definitely help with all of that. If all of our documentation you can find at wiki.jetstream-cloud.org. Our user guides are also available on XSEED. And we have a few virtual workshops. These videos were done, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 years ago. It's still quite useful. So they're available at on the Cornell website. And these are our Jetstream partners. And this is our Jetstream 2 partners. And that's kind of all I have. This part. Do you have any questions? Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, that was great. Round of applause. And we have two people that joined us, Tom and Ryan, if y'all want to introduce yourselves and what may be your interest in cloud computing for research.
Sorry, I had to plug our mic in. I do have a question. Can we use Terraform to control OpenStack and or Ansible to provision VMs?
I think you can use Ansible. I'm not sure about Terraform. Julian, do you know?
Yes, I know that Jeremy has been talking to a few people. I've used Terraform with OpenStack. It just works. Terraform can be a little bit rough sometimes on cloud resources when it switches state. It can create a bit of churn, but I know that in the Jetstream 2 proposal, they explicitly call out Terraform as wanting to enable that kind of provisioning. For reference, Exosphere under the hood uses Ansible to provision the graphical desktop and remote in-web web browser terminal and web desktop experience. So yes, definitely you can use both Terraform and Ansible, and I can probably help you with that or point you in the right direction.
Julian, are you still in South Africa?
No, I'm back now. Yeah.
Excellent. I was thinking about Ansible because the Sanjana said about the poor undergraduates laboring to create virtual machines and screwing it up. It seems like something like that would help.
Yeah, we're talking about making it easier for researchers to start using some of these more advanced tools like Terraform and Ansible to create like recipes for how to provision these virtual machines, a bit like Binder has this ability to say, install this, install RStudio, install these R dependencies. Like, how do you help people get started and without actually realizing they're actually starting to use declarative recipes for how to get to this reproducible environment. So yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, Sanjana, can this be used to install new softwares on that? And can I run, say, similar agent-based modeling? Because I've been using NetLogo for my simulations. So is it possible in this?
You can basically bring any software you want to onto a virtual machine. Some of the things that you need to keep in mind is does it have is a proprietary software? So does it have any license key in it? So if you bring a software with a license key in it, then make sure that you don't save it as a public image. So people, everybody on Jetstream won't have access to it. But apart from that, you can basically bring in any software you want. And you can do anything with your virtual machine. Really, you have no control. Unless you're mining Bitcoins, you're okay to do whatever you want.
Okay, thanks.
Just a procedural questions. I apologize for coming in late. Can we get the first part of this presentation again sometime?
I'm sorry, did you mean get the first part of the presentation?
Yeah, it's being recorded. I saw, so I can expect to see it sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, Tom, we'll be posting the recordings on YouTube, and we'll be sending out links and all that to everybody.
Terrific. Thanks, Blake.
Yeah, sure thing.
Do we want to go ahead with the hands-on?
Yeah, I think so. I can. That That way everyone can try out their software and installation and get a feel for it. I will send out links to each person. So give me just a second here to go down the list.
Did we get added on an Exceed? Is that how this works?
So we have a training account for tutorials. So every time we have a tutorial, we just need to kind of reserve those training accounts with
Mhm.
Exceed and say that, hey, I have a tutorial, I need 50 accounts, or, and so they will reserve those training accounts for people, and the passwords are changed every time we have a tutorial. So, this allocation is reserved just for training.
Okay, I was just curious because I just saw an allocation pop up on Exceed that I don't know what it is. And I thought maybe you
Well, if it's your
had added us.
personal account, then no, I don't remember what allocation you should see. Let's see.
This,
So I sent everyone.
it appears to be an acronym crappy.
That may not be
computational-
that.
No, that sounds like some scientists having fun with acronyms. Somebody's added you.
Yeah,
to figure it out.
I'm on it. I just saw Julian's name on it. I don't know what it is. I don't think yeah, I don't know what that's about.
If you're working with Cyverse, you're going to have all kinds of weird project names that you're going to be hearing on to. So this is a good intro. I think Coalesce was just one that they just got funded. So that one will come down the track at some point. So I sent everyone their username, which will be train and some number. And then the next thing that starts with an M is your password. So I think we're good to go. Sanjana, you want to show them how to use all that stuff?
Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. It says Exceed on there right now. So, all right, so if you can go to use.jetstream-cloud.org.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. So it's use.jetstream-cloud.org. I've sent that in the chat. So I should bring you to this page. And you will need to log in with Exceed. And Exceed now requires a dual authentication. We don't have that for the training accounts because it's just a pain to do that. So if you click on continue, it will ask you for your username and password. And so you can just type in for username, you will type in a train account. And fill in your password. And it should skip duo and bring you to the Jetstream dashboard. So all of our training accounts are on this allocation. So you should be able to see this allocation on your dashboard. And so some of this I've touched upon already. On your dashboard, you will see 3 big buttons: launch new instance, browse for resources, or change the settings. If you scroll down, you will see what resources are being used. So for this allocation, we've used 3.1% of the SUs allocated. And if you scroll further down, you can see how many CPUs, memory, storage, volumes this account, that is, mine will be the Train 50 account, is using on Indiana University or TAC. So once you start launching instances, you will see that this over here changes. And if you scroll further down, you will see the instance history. So this tells you what instances were launched by Train 50 account. So this must have been at some other workshop. The last instance on Train 50 was launched on October 9, 2020. It was a Ubuntu developer and Docker image was used, and that instance was called Camp 1. So it doesn't really give you much more information. If I clicked on Camp 1, it'll tell me that that instance was deleted, and then I will see more information on that. All right, so what we do here first is we create instances. Now you can do that 2 ways. You can do that by launching this, clicking on this big launch button, or you can click on project, and this account hasn't been cleaned out, so we still see a project from the cybersecurity camp. But you can go ahead and create a new project on your account, and so I'm going to create a project with that project name. It's always helpful to give your project a unique name and to give it a description. There have been many times when I conduct workshops and I go ahead and create a test project, and my description is test. And sometimes I just randomly end up with 5 test projects and their descriptions are test, and it's very confusing to kind of understand what I've been doing with these projects. But I can go ahead and delete all of that because since it's a demo, it doesn't really matter. I'm just doing this for testing reasons. But if you have instances of valuable information on them, you want to know what you're putting on there. And it's always, it's okay if you have 1 instance, but if you have 10 instances, you don't want to log into every one of them to find out what's in there. So I like giving a descriptive project when putting a descriptive line in here if I have something of value on my instance. So I'm gonna go ahead and create. So that was quick. I have a project. So I can come in here and then click on new to launch a new instance. Or if I go back to my dashboard, I can launch an instance from there as well. Now, either way, it will bring me to this page where I can select what image I want to start. So image is basically a template. It's got all of the information you need to go into your instance, which is a running instance of that image. So this image has all the information I need for my instance. So for demo reasons, let me just go ahead and click on CentOS 8. It tells me when this instance was created. If I go back, it'll tell me when this image was updated right here. And I will see all of these tags. And it also says here the installation size is approximately 5 gigs. So that's just some information you may want to have. Now I can launch this instance. When I launch this instance, I can either leave the name as is, or I can give it a descriptive name. Again, it's always nice to have a unique descriptive name. So all right, so I have an instance name. The base image version, you always want to have the latest or the latest image you can use, because these are the images that have been updated, and we know that they're working. Now, there are two projects. I have the cybersecurity camp project that was created last year, and I have the ResBazAZ demo project that I just created. So I'm going to go ahead and select the project I need. And I can also select how many instances I want to launch. Now, for now, I'm just going to use one. I'm just going to launch one. And if you have multiple allocations on this drop-down menu here, you should be able to see all of those allocations. We really don't have an option here, so I'm going to stick with that. You can select what provider you want. Now, I only see Indiana University here, and the reason for that is this image was updated today. So if you look here, it was updated on May 18th. And once it is updated, it is immediately available at Indiana University. It syncs overnight, and it will be available on TAC the next day. So for now, I'm just going to launch this on Indiana University. If you want to launch something on TAC, you can then go ahead and select one version down, right? So then you can have both available. All right. The other thing I can select is the instance size. I'm not really going to be doing any calculations on this server, so I'm going to keep the instance really small. So I have an N1 tiny, just one CPU, and 8 gigs of disk space. And it tells me how much allocation I am using. So I have used 3% of my SUs, and I will be using one out of the total 130 allotted CPUs. So each user has 132 CPUs they can launch. If I want to launch an M1 extra large, it will use 44 CPUs. So this tells me how much I will be using. Right, so let's go back to tiny, and I'm going to click launch. Now, it takes a second to launch, so you just want to stay on the screen for a little bit till this box goes away.
Do you mind if we ask questions as you go?
No, I don't.
Okay. So I noticed the instance size is roughly the same proportion of CPU and memory as you scale up 1 to 2, 1 to 1.5, etc. Is there any way to change, for instance, if you needed only a few CPUs, but a huge amount of memory?
Unfortunately, no. I mentioned before that we are a small team. So when we have, if you're allowed to mix and match, then it just makes so much more work for us on the admin side. So we have tried to keep it simple with just having directly proportional CPU sizes and memory. So unfortunately, right now we don't have that option, and I don't think we can do that with Jetstream 2 either.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so this one's launching, and so you will see that it goes through a build and scheduling phase. The one thing I did was I gave it a descriptive name, but I popped out of that window and came back in, and I forgot to change the name again. So my instance is now called CentOS 8, but I can always change it here to whatever I want it to be. So let's just do that. So here I can look at all the information related to that, the instance that I've launched. So notice that, first of all, status is active, but it is in the networking state. So this is not completely active. So you really can't access this instance just yet. The only time you can access this instance is when it goes from yellow to green active. So that button is going to change to green, and then you can access your instance. Your instance, you can also see the size of your instance. It shows it's tiny, so there's all that information. The IP address. IP addresses are assigned when you launch an instance. Now, there's no way to keep this IP address forever. If I shut this instance down or suspend it or shelve it, when it comes back up, it may or may not have the same IP address, because once the instance goes down, this IP is released to the pool, and if some other instance comes up, it could be given to that new instance. So you may or may not end up with the same IP address. So if your work requires you to have a persistent IP address, for example, if you're running a gateway, or if you're running a server, or you're running a website on this instance, then you would need a persistent IP. And the only way to have a persistent IP associated with your virtual machine is to launch it on the API side. So with Atmosphere, the IP address could change when your server goes down. All right, so this instance is based on this image, which is the CentOS 8 image. Provider is Jetstream at Indiana University. So this is currently being launched on one of the 320 nodes at Jetstream. And this is the alias or the UUID. So if you need to report your instance because it's not coming up, if it is stuck in networking, if you need help with troubleshooting it, you can always give us the UUID, which is a universally unique identifier for this virtual machine, and tell us that, hey, this server with this UUID isn't working, or it's stuck in a certain state, and can you help me? And we can go look at that UUID. Now, if you tell us, if you have 15 instances running and you tell us that, hey, a CentOS 8 instance isn't working, it's usually not very helpful, and we will ask you for the UUID. So you can copy paste this UUID and send it to Exceed Help, or you can go and report it, and this will auto-populate the ticket that is sent to us will have the UUID for that instance. I'm not going to report this instance because the admin or the user support, which one of whom is me, will have to go delete the instance later. So I'm not going to go do that. The other things we see on this page are the allocation source. So if you have multiple allocations, you can choose to charge your virtual machine to one or the other. And allocations are charged on a 15-minute cycle. So if I selected another allocation, at the end of the 15 minutes, you will still be charged for 15 minutes on this allocation, and then you will be switched over to the other allocation. All right, so our instance is deploying right now. So some of the buttons we see on the right-hand side, the action buttons, there's a report, we have reboot and redeploy. So for whatever reason, if your instance is stuck, say it's stuck deploying and you've waited for a while and you need help, then you can either reboot it or redeploy it and see if it comes up. The other giant button here in the red is a delete button. If you delete your instance, it's gone forever. We don't back it up. So think twice before you hit the delete button. And once your instance goes active, we should see a few more action buttons pop up, and we can talk about that in a bit. So if you go to where your username is, so there's a drop-down menu under your username. So in my case, that's train50. I can go look at settings, requests, and so on. So let's go to settings. Now in your settings, you can receive or not receive notifications. So when an instance finishes launching, I usually, on my personal Jetstream account, I have this checked. So if an instance launches, I will immediately get an email saying your instance is available. You can choose different icons for your images. This doesn't really have an impact on the research you're doing. It's just something some people like to play with. Web shell color, and here you can select what web shell color you want. A lot of people like dark mode, so you can use a white on black. I personally like black on white for tutorials because it's easy to see, and not everybody likes the dark mode. And for more advanced options, you can have some deployment scripts over here. So when you have deployment scripts, you can choose to deploy them once every time you launch an instance or every time you reboot an instance. So that depends on what you want your deploy script to do. So you can put that in there. We're not going to bother with SSH configuration for this tutorial, but if you bring in an SSH key over here, you can log into your terminal through SSH. So just SSH at IP address. And if you have your key set up, you should just be able to use that and not come in through the web interface. And how to do all of that is on our wiki page. So if you have any questions, you can always go check that out. So let me check on my instance. All right, so my instance was launched on the cybersecurity camp project because I didn't double check where it was launching when I redid it. So I can always move it from one project to the other. I'm going to check that and move my selected resources to a different project. So move resources, and it's over here. All right, so my instance is active, and you will see that I have more buttons available on the right. So some of the buttons are suspend, show, and stop. So I mentioned to you that the way we charge is we charge one service unit per hour for every virtual CPU. So this is a tiny, so it has one CPU. So every hour this is up, I'm consuming one service unit. And that only starts when this button goes green active. So you saw that it was active this whole time, this yellow active, you weren't getting charged. But now, once it goes green, you get charged. So once the instance is green active, a user is being charged 100%. So 1 SU per CPU. If the user decides, if you decide that you don't want to use your service, your virtual machine for hours or days or weeks, then you can go ahead and suspend, shell, or stop the instance. Now, suspend will, this is the memory resident, so it will still be both suspend and stop. You will still be occupying a node on the hypervisor. So it's not completely making that node available for other users to come in and use. So for suspend and stop, for suspend, we are charging 75% of the SUs, and stop consumes 50%. So if I stop this instance, then I will be consuming half an SU per hour. And so that is a good way to conserve SUs if you know that you may or may not be coming back to your instance immediately. The other way to conserve SUs is to shelve the instance. So if you shelve the instance, you are basically packaging everything up and putting it on a shelf and making that node available to another user that wants to use it. And in that case, once it's shelved, you will not be consuming any SUs at all. So that's just something to keep in mind and understand. All right, so how do we access this instance? We have this here, we know that it's available. How do we access it? So you can access it from this web page in two ways. You can click on Open Web Shell, and it will bring you to a web shell on your browser. So you see that you're logged into Atmosphere to training account 50, and this is part of your IP address right here. So I can do an ls, I can do anything that I would want to do on the terminal over here on the web shell. The other way to access it is to go through the web desktop. And so this is like a personal desktop on a computer. It's more point and click, and if users are not comfortable using the command line, you can just do that point and click over here. And notice that when I open the web shell, the web desktop, the web shell closed, so you can only use one or the other at any given time. All right, at the bottom of the screen, you see it says to copy and paste or upload and download, use Control-Alt-Shift. So if I did Control-Alt-Shift, that will bring up this clipboard. And so if you want to copy or paste anything, you will have to copy and paste it into this clipboard here and then bring it to your terminal. And that's basically to avoid bots from taking over your virtual machine. So just for example, let me see if I can copy that IP address. And if I try to paste it here, I really cannot. If I use a Mac, so if I did a Command V, it's not going to paste anything there. But if I did, if I brought out that clipboard, now I have this option to paste it over here. And once that's pasted over here, I can paste it over here. So otherwise, this doesn't really work, pasting. So that is one way to bring, to copy paste things into your browser, your web shell. And there are various other options here to play with. You can upload files from here. Okay. So once you've logged into your system, and if you are able to generate a workflow, install software, and if you're comfortable with everything you have on there, since we don't back up your data, you're responsible for all your own backups. So one way to save your data, save your workflow, is to image your virtual machine. And you can click in imaging, and imaging will bring you to this form at multiple pages. So if you fill this form out, it'll ask you if this is a new image or not. You can give it a description. So when you come back to launch this image later, you know what's on it. Or if the community wants to use your image, they'll know what's on it. And you can tag your image. So you can give it various tags. All right, so I have a name, I have a description, and version name. So this is a new image, so it'll be 1.0. If I'm updating it, I want to give it a different number, say 1.1, 1.01, and add to it what I have changed. If this is a new image, I can say only testing, do not run. So if I accidentally submit this, the admin team, the team knows not to run this, not to process this. Okay, so once you've done that, you go to the next screen, and it will ask you here if you want it to be public, private, or if you want only specific users to have access to this. So we encourage keeping your image public unless you have data that you do not want to share with anybody, unless you have software that requires licensing, and so on. If you have sensitive data, like if you have patient records, Jetstream doesn't have the compliance for that kind of stuff. So we encourage you to keep all of that data off of Jetstream. But this is one way you can select who has access to your images. And then I can go ahead and submit this image. There are some advanced options you may or may not want to play with. So, all right, so when I go to the last page, it'll give me all of this data that I've just put in, just so I confirm it, and then I have to say I certify that. So it doesn't have any license restricted software, and then I can request an image. I'm not going to do that now. All right, so once that image is submitted, it will send us an email saying an image request that was submitted, and then we process it as soon as possible. Usually that image will be available to the user within a couple hours. Okay. What else? One more thing that you might be interested in is volumes. So this particular instance has only 8 GPU space. So if you want to bring in a lot of data, then ideally you just want to have scripts on your machine, on your virtual machine, so it can go fetch data from a volume and process it and put it back on the data, on the volume. So let's go back to projects. And over here, you can select new volume. And users have 100 GB of total allotted space. Excuse me. And this is more than what is available on your instance, obviously. So you can, if you need more space, you can always request for more, and that will have to be allocated through Exceed. But for any users that come in on Jetstream, they will have 100 GB of space. And you can launch 10 volumes. So I can launch 10 volumes, 10 GBs of space, or I can launch one volume with 100 GB of space, right? So, all right. And the other thing, it's very important with volumes is if you launch a volume, suppose I launch one on Indiana University, this volume can only be attached to servers or virtual machines that are also running on Indiana University. So if I launch this volume on the Tech Cloud, I cannot currently attach that to my existing virtual machine because this is running on Indiana University cloud. So I'm going to go ahead and create a volume, 10 GBs of space at Jetstream, Indiana University. I'm going to say create. All right, so I have one volume, and now you see that it's not attached to anything. If I click on that volume, I can see more information about this volume. And this volume also has an identifier, which is the UUID. So you can always report issues with this volume, and it will come to as a ticket. All right, so this volume is not attached to anything, so we can go ahead and attach it to the only running instance that I have, and I say attach volume, and it's going to go through the attaching process, and when it goes green, that means that your volume is available. You can also see that on this screen here. All right, so it took a few seconds and this volume is now attached to our CentOS instance. So let's go take a look at this volume. I'm going to go to my web shell. And that volume is now attached at that mount point. And it doesn't matter what name you give your volume. It doesn't really copy that name over here. It is always mounted on volume B or volume C or so on. So suppose I attach another volume. So I'm creating a second volume and it's created but not attached. I attach it to my CentOS 8 instance. All right, so if I do a df-h, I should see that is the system, and then I have volume B. If I do an ls, volume still not attached. So when the volume gets attached, it will pop up as volume C. That is my second volume. And when I see disk usage, I will see my first volume, my second volume. Anyways, so There's nothing in there. And I just created a file called file.txt. And so that's as simple as it can be. We created a volume, we attached a couple volumes to the same instance. And so when you're done using this instance, you can always delete it. But to be able to delete it or to image this instance, you need to detach the volumes. So again, just go ahead and detach a volume. And you see that volume B and volume C have now gone. So that's all I have. Do you guys have any questions?
Are you able to show us exosphere operation?
Yes. And since Julian is here, the expert creator of Exosphere. So this is what the website looks like. This is, let me see. If I want to create an instance, I can go here, say instance, and it will bring me to this page. Now, the difference between creating or being able to launch instances on Exosphere and Atmosphere is that some images were born on Atmosphere, some were born on the API side. So on Exosphere, you want to use the images that were born on the API side because, you know, just compatibility issues. Some things may or may not work when you try to bring an Atmosphere born image to here. And so all of the images on Atmosphere will start with JS API featured. Again, JS API featured are the images that are maintained by the Jetstream team. And you might see other images as well. It's from various other users. So I can go ahead and select this instance. And it gives it a remarkably tender name, and I can give it test, and you can select the instances you want. Now you notice that I have more flavors than you saw earlier. These are the GPU flavors that are accessible to specific accounts. Right, so I will launch an M1 Tiny. I can choose what disk size I want my instance to have. Just going to go ahead with the default. How many instances do I want to launch? I can go all the way up to 176, which is how many my quota will allow me. Do I want to enable web desktop? I don't typically use web desktop, so I'm going to say no, but you can go ahead and say yes. And Julie and Chris are still working on a lot of the aspects of Exosphere. So you see dialog boxes like that tell you so. Advanced options. Install operating system updates. Yes, you want to install operating system updates so your system is up to date. Remember that Jetstream, our team, does make all these updates on a regular basis, but sometimes it might be 20 days after our update, and there might have been 3 releases of some kind of security patch. So if you are able to update your operating system, you should. Deploy guacamole for easy remote access. You can say yes. Network. Now, all the networks that are over here are networks that have been created on OpenStack via Horizon. So if you don't know what network to use, then you can let Exosphere choose network for you. I usually go with the network that I've created because I kind of sort of know what I'm doing. So I choose that. And SSH key. I have multiple SSH keys uploaded on Horizon, so I can select whatever I want. If I don't have an SSH key, then I can choose to upload one right here. And when things go wrong, Julian is making notes. All right, let's go back. All right, so I can go ahead and hit create, and it'll take a few seconds. And you see that my test instance is already popped up over here. Okay, so I have a public IP address. Can you guys see my terminal? No? All right, I'm gonna stop share just a second. Can you see my terminal now? Okay. So the IP address is available here, and it is pinging, so my network is up. And it still says building. In my experience, a lot of times the server is available for you to log on to. So let's see. If I scroll down here, there to native SSH, I can copy that and say, is this big enough? Can you see what's on my terminal?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I can SSH, or maybe not.
Sanjana, I think you want to go to line 99. If you
That's
go, yeah, if you delete that and you go 99G, I think it goes to. Oh, well, kind of. There we go. Yeah, that's the delete. Yeah, that should do it. So the background for people is like she previously had SSH to a server with the same IP address, but that server is gone, so there's now a new server, and so SSH detects that the server's identification is different, so it just makes sure that it doesn't do anything sneaky.
So again, let's give that another try. It's going to ask me, are you sure you want to continue? Say yes, and then it'll ask me for my password. I never get it right in the first try, but that's neat. All right, so we're logged into Exo user as test. So we're logged into this server. The other way to log into this is, let's see. I can also do, this is in Ubuntu, so I can also do Ubuntu at that. And so for people that are familiar with the API side, you know, on the API side, you log in with Ubuntu at IP address or CentOS at IP address. And with Exosphere, it just makes it easy for people that are not familiar with the API side to just copy paste and log in as this user. So there you have it. I'm logged into this user. We do have suspend, shelf, image, reboot, delete, and all of those buttons that we've seen. I can log in to the web shell. There we go. Sorry. The web desktop is not available just yet.
I think you maybe did not enable web desktop when you launched.
I didn't because I don't use it. So I'm just used to not having web desktop on. So if you want web desktop, that is another option you could have chosen while creating this instance. Right, so the attaching volume, so you can attach a volume. Select an instance to attach it to. This is my instance. So the other thing to notice is you may have access to other user instances. So I'm going to select mine and select the volume. Do I know which volume I want? Not yet. So I can go ahead and create a volume. And create a volume of size 10 GB. Go ahead and create that. Okay, go back to my instance. And now when I want to attach a volume, I'll see the one I need. Right, so this is a demo volume. This is one I just created. And scroll down the page and I can do attach. And it says that my volume is attached. Go to my instance. And I will see that my volume is attached at dev SDB. And that is the mount point. Anything else to add, Julie?
No, I think that you've covered pretty much everything.
Okay. Any questions? If you think of any, if you know, a question pops up in your head later, then you can always reach us at Jetstream. Jeremy, Brian, and myself mostly answer all the tickets. So if you have any questions on how to get started, how to get an allocation, please reach out to us. And if you have any trouble with anything related to Jetstream, we can definitely try and help you out. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Thanks, Sanjana, for the awesome session.
I think
Yeah, if you guys have feedback, there's a link that I shared in the chat. Please go ahead and do the feedback. Thanks, Sanjana.
Thanks, guys.